Today, I'm thrilled to bring you my interview with Mark Metcalf, star of stage and screens, big and small. Mark has played over 60 roles from Neidermeyer in Animal House to the Maestro on Seinfeld and everything in between. But you know him best as the big bad in the first season of Buffy, the Master. Woo!
Okay.
So, Mark, I am so excited that you are here today and that we get to hang out and talk about your life, your career. We, of course, are going to talk about your new book coming out, and we are going to talk a lot about Buffy. So,
Good.
it's really wonderful to see you.
It's good to see you. It's always good to see you. I don't know what happens to me. Something happens to me when I see your perfectly framed face and your
Aw,
really lovely face. Thank
aw,
you.
oh my gosh. So let's go back to the beginning. Can you talk a little bit about your early life growing up? I know you were born in Ohio and then were in St. Louis, and then you went to school in New Jersey. So can you take us through a little bit of that path that you've had?
Sure. I was born in Findlay, Ohio, the home of tasty taters, and am, according to the Chamber of Commerce, I'm the second most famous person to have been born in Findlay, Ohio.
Who's the
Uh,
first?
Ben Roethlisberger, who was a quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, who
I think you should be
went to high
first.
school. Huh?
I think
Well,
you should be
you know,
first.
football trumps a lot of things.
Yeah.
I actually was very proud of myself in terms of football, the sports trumping things in America, which it almost always does, trumping the arts. But I auctioned myself off to raise money for the Alzheimer's Association.
Oh,
And the deal was I'd come to your house and show the movie Animal House and answer questions and tell stories and generally entertain for a couple of hours while we watched the movie. And I'd bring food because at the time I owned a restaurant.
oh,
And that auction item, I think, went for $3,000 or something like that. About $400 more than a helmet signed by a famous linebacker for the Green Bay Packers.
So you were number
So
one.
I felt vindicated that the arts trumped sports for once.
Yay.
But I was born in Findlay and lived there for 2 weeks while my mother recovered from my birth. In those days, they didn't tell you to leave as soon as the baby was out of the gate. They kept you for a while. A nurse came to her mother's house, which is where she lived, for 2 weeks afterwards every day just to make sure she was okay.
Oh my
And she was
gosh.
in the hospital for 2 weeks before that. So I had a month of tender, loving care from medical profession and from my mother and from my grandmother.
Oh,
Although my grandmother, I'm told, I don't know whose book everybody was reading about raising children at the time, but you were supposed to feed the child at exactly 2 o'clock, 4 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And
oh,
I was sleeping. My grandmother would snap the bottoms of my feet to wake me up. This
oh
is,
my gosh.
I know it seems like a kind of a torture. It seems like it would make eating not a thing that I would remember well, but I love to eat now. So I guess it didn't
So it didn't have lasting bad impact.
Nothing that's ever come up in therapy, no.
But do you like your feet being touched?
Yeah, I do. But
Okay.
not snapped, just I'm a Pisces, so I love a good foot massage. And then my father and my mother had moved already to St. Louis, Missouri, Webster Groves, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. Already my mother went back home to have me. So after 2 weeks of bliss in my grandparents' house in the middle of Findlay, Ohio, in the middle of Ohio cornfields, I moved back to Webster Groves, which was another kind of bliss, and it was a great place to grow up.
Mm.
In fact, in 1966, CBS did a documentary. They set about to find the quintessential American suburb, and they chose Webster Groves, Missouri,
Oh,
middle of the
wow.
country, north and south, east and west. And then my dad, who was a civil engineer, was offered his company called Sturgeon Parcel, got the bid for their engineering design on a bridge tunnel combination that's now called the Chesapeake Bay Bridge Tunnel. It crosses the mouth of Chesapeake Bay, 23 miles across the mouth, and they had to build 4 islands so that they could sink tunnels, so that there could be tunnels that go under it. It was quite an engineering feat. National Geographic called it the 8th engineering wonder of the modern world or something like
Oh
that.
my goodness. And your dad was very involved and instrumental in it.
He was very involved in that. In fact, he was moved from Webster Groves, Missouri to New York to open an office for Surgical and Parcel there that would specifically handle all the tunnel work. And he'd been a bridge and highwayman, so he had to learn about tunnels, had to learn about managing an office, and commuted from Westfield, New Jersey into New York every day. He got up at 5:30 and got back at 7:30 every night. Very busy guy for the 4 years that I lived there with him. And then I went away to college at the University of Michigan and pretty much discovered the theater and discovered acting and never went home. For 6 years, I stayed away just because I was busy
Mhm.
in basements and theaters.
You mentioned going to college and discovering theater. Is that when you knew that you wanted to be a performer, or did you have that inkling earlier?
I never had the inkling earlier. I'd seen one play, Damn Yankees. My mother took us from St. Louis to New York, mostly because she wanted to go. We walked around a lot and we took cabs and buses and we went to one play, Damn Yankees, and I got sick. And it's so sick that we had to leave New York and go to her cousin
Oh,
who lived in
no.
Long Island. Yeah. But I don't think it was Gwen Verdon that made me sick.
No, it couldn't be.
No, she couldn't make me sick. She sort of thrills me. Back to my introduction to the theater was my roommate, a fellow named John Knox. In my sophomore year, I was an engineer, and he said, "Come with me. I'm going to the theater department in the Frieze building to audition for parts in these plays. They're doing all three parts of Henry VI. They need lots of actors." I wasn't an actor, I was an engineer. But, he said, the girls are really friendly in the theater department. And that was all it took. So I went and auditioned and was cast in 13 parts over the course of the three plays. I had 13 makeup changes and costume changes because I was always a messenger coming on saying, "Sir, the army's over the hill," or something like that, or just standing there with a spear. I was a spear carrier. I had one or two complete scenes as a murderer, but I do remember getting really into it. In order to change character, I put a putty nose on, and I realized I could do kind of a Roman nose with a big bump up here. And then when I come off and change costume, I could push it down and make it kind of a pointed nose. And then I could come back and push it and make it broken to the right. And then I could put it back, break it to the left. I could do all kinds of things with this hunk of putty on my nose and then dab some makeup to cover the seams. And I was 4 or 5 different characters. That's all it took. A change of costume and a change of nose.
Yeah, very Orson Welles, right? He always
Yeah.
did a lot of
Yeah.
nose.
Oh, yeah. And prosthetics are great. Masks are great. I mean, you've studied, you know, a mask is very liberating because it's somehow no longer you. So you can do all kinds of things. So I got 15 parts, did all three, and we did one performance each night for, I think, a month. And on the 4 weekends, we did all three in one day.
Oh my gosh, a marathon.
It is a marathon. And when you're changing makeups and things like that, you're moving all the time. So it was
Yeah.
a real trial by fire for me. I mean, it was a real serious introduction to the theater.
Was that it? By that moment, you were bitten by the theater bug, and
I was totally bitten by the theater bug. I never admitted to myself that I was going to be an actor. I just was acting because it was so much fun to do all this make-believe stuff and realizing slowly over the course of time that it's make-believe, but it's true.
right.
The truth is revealed by the lie
Mhm.
of the theater. People
Mhm.
always think actors are lying, but we're not. We're telling the truth. I mean, if we're doing it the right way,
Absolutely.
we're revealing a truth about ourselves and about the character and about the story.
So then after school, did you decide, okay, I am an actor, I'm moving to New York to be an actor, or did you just move there still saying, I like this, it's fun? How did that happen?
I did move there saying, I like this. This is fun to do. But before that, when I got out of school, Vietnam was still going on.
Oh,
And it was the draft, and the lottery was not there yet. I didn't even have a low number. I was just due to get the letter. So I disappeared into the mountains of California first. I went to San Francisco. I hitchhiked up and down the coast, worked a little bit outside of Monterey and Pacific Grove, and eventually made my way up to the mountains of Mount Hood and lived there, all the while trying not to get the letter from the Selective Service asking me to come fight the war. And when I finally had to go back to New Jersey and do the physical and was adjudicated to be morally, physically, and psychologically unfit for military service, because I was pretty crazy, crazy looking, because I'd been living in the mountains, long hair.
Did you play it up?
Oh, yeah.
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 Did
Yeah.
you play the part?
I played the part. It was, again, as we said earlier, it was the truth of me that I was kind of crazy and wild and a hippie. I mean, I was a deep in the bone hippie.
You brought that to the forefront.
I brought that to the forefront, exactly, and I turned the volume up just a little bit to make sure that they got it, and they did, whereas I was very happy and proud, in fact, to have found a way without a lot of letters from doctors and a lot of other things to get me out of going to fight in that war. I have nothing against people who serve in the armed forces and nothing except compassion and empathy. But the real reason that I decided I didn't want to go to fight the war was because I knew that I'd be good at it. I knew that just based on my personality, my respect for authority, and my need for authority, and need to be in authority, as well as having somebody above me and below me, that I would be good at that. I thought I would be a good soldier, but I didn't want to become the person that I imagined I would become if I was a soldier in that war at that time. It changes you. The sorrow and the pity of war is not just that people die, but the people who kill the people are changed.
Of course.
I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to become who I might become if I'd joined. So I did what I could to get out. And then I went back to the University of Michigan, started acting again and working on a master's, sort of. Mostly I was there just to act because I could do it and people wanted me to do it. And that's when I really sort of began to think this is something I could do for a long time. But I don't think it was till I'd been in New York for 5 years
Oh, wow.
doing just theater,
Uh-huh.
turning down movies and television because it was beneath me. I know, I just loved Shakespeare. I loved the literature of the theater. Movies and television, whereas they were fun to watch and entertaining, I wanted to be a part of something that was alive, as
Mhm.
the theater is, and that had a depth and the ability to add layer upon layer upon layer if you're doing a good play, even if you're doing a bad play. But it wasn't until probably I got offered a job in a movie that I really decided that I was a little bit beyond just having a good time. As long as people wanted to ask me to do it, wanted to give me money to do it, it was a career. It was beyond a job. A friend of mine, John Hurd, a wonderful actor, once noted that whenever anybody asked me, what do you do? I always said, I work as an actor, not I am an actor.
Interesting.
It's an interesting distinction, and I
It
never
is.
consciously made the decision to say that, but John pointed it out, and I liked it that I did say that
Mhm.
because I think it's an interesting and probably a healthier, possibly, way of looking at the work as it's a job. It's my craft. It's what I do. It's not who I am.
Mhm. It's a part of who you are.
It's a part of who I am. Yes, what I do is a part of who I am, but it's not all of who I am.
Were your parents supportive when you made the shift? You went to go into engineering like your father, and then now you're acting. Was that hard for them to swallow, or were they excited about it initially?
They weren't excited about my mother, I think, was secretly and quietly excited about it. She'd been an art major in college, and then World War II came along, and she went to work in Washington in the waves. And I think she secretly was happy for me and proud of me and excited. My dad was not. The fact that I'd gone to college as an engineer and that I'd been good in math and all those things and throughout high school had everything to do with me trying to find a way to be able to communicate with my father. And my father realized if I was an engineer, he could communicate with me better because our minds would work in a similar way. So he was never happy about it. The only time that I'm aware that he was proud of what I did was when I did videos for a band called Twisted Sister on MTV,
Yeah.
which finished with the tagline, "What do you want to do with your life?"
Uh-huh.
Heavy metal, rock and roll. But Dee Snider testified for Tipper Gore in her hearings on sex and violence and rock and roll,
Right.
and
Right.
testified on the floor of the Senate. And they showed the entire video on the floor of the Senate. And a friend of my father's who read, I think, in the Wall Street Journal that these hearings were going on, and they used my name, that I, as an actor, had been part of this video that was shown. My father was very proud of that my work was in the Senate
In the
record book.
Senate. He
I
could
don't think
relate to that.
that meant success for him. I don't
Right.
think he ever saw the video or anything. He was proud of that. He also was happy with the work I did on a television show called JAG. I played a naval air colonel. He was in the Navy and on an aircraft carrier, and we shot on an aircraft carrier, and he was on an aircraft carrier in World War II. So he related to that part. He thought I'd done that very well. I'm not sure that he was able to make the distinction between me
And
and
the
the character
character.
I was playing. He liked the character, but he
Right.
said, I liked you in that part.
When you talked a little bit about what you love about theater, I'm a fellow stage actor, and I know all of the things that I love about it. Can you talk a little bit more about what it is about doing live theater that really makes your heart tick?
A very good friend of mine, the fellow I mentioned before, Tim Mayer, who directed me in Henry IV at the Kennedy Center, a great director, he said to me early on, when I was doing As You Like It for him at Milwaukee Repertory Theater, he said the difference between acting on stage and in film or television is that on stage you can be shot, which I understood him to
Yes.
mean. It's really alive, and if
Alive.
they really don't like you, either you as the actor or you as the character, they can shoot you if they can get a gun in there. And conversely, you can shoot them. So it's really alive. It's really a life and death situation.
The stakes are there.
The stakes are high. There's an urgency to it. And because of that, there's an intimacy to it with who you're working with. And there's an intimacy with this whole mass of not necessarily anonymous people who are sitting in the dark watching you and listening to you. My most favorite moments in the theater always have to do with the audience responding in some way that they never expected to respond. It's a power that you have and that you have to take responsibility for when you're in front of people and performing for them, because they give you something.
They do.
They open themselves that much, so you have that responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's a powerful thing. So that's what I love about the theater mostly, is just the fact that things can go wrong because it's alive.
My husband always says something that I really like, which is that he says the audience tells you each night what they need from you. And it is that relationship. The show changes night to night in that way. It is a communication.
Yeah.
Have you ever had someone yell at you on stage? I was once doing a show at the Pittsburgh Public Theater. My character is pregnant and doesn't know who the father is. It was a Clifford Ardette's Awake and Sing. And in the middle of a scene with my mother where she finds out that I'm pregnant and we're having a fight, this woman yells at the top of her lungs right at me, "Oh, will you just stop that?" And I had this moment where I thought, oh my God, I can't really stop it. I have another page and a half of this scene to go. And oh my God, she's really angry at me. And we got off stage, and Miriam, who played my mom, said to me, "That was amazing. Oh my God, she was so moved. She must have had a similar response, something that happened in her life." And I said, "Yeah, it was great for you. She wasn't yelling at you." It was crazy.
I know when I was stabbed in the stomach and bleeding to death on the floor of the Mitzi Newhouse Theater when I was doing Streamers, at one time, a fellow had a heart attack.
Oh my gosh.
And another time, somebody stood up and threw a program and walked out and said something. I don't remember what he said. My favorite interaction with the audience is I was doing a Hamlet in the Central Park. Sam Waterston was playing Hamlet. John Lithgow was doing Laertes. I was doing Marcellus. And we're on the battlements in the first scene, and it's raining. It's outdoors at the Delacorte Theater, and it's summertime. And the costume person insisted on putting us all in wool because it was Denmark, and no particular season mentioned. So it was hot and it was raining, but you went on anyway because the
Of
people
course.
had waited. But it was just a little drizzle at the beginning. And then by halfway through the scene on the battlements, when the ghost first appears, it was really raining and we were going on. My character was doing a big turn towards the audience because the ghost had just appeared and disappeared. And I say, it is as the air, invisible, and our vein blows malicious mockery. And instead of that, I said, it is as the air, wet. And I looked up at Steve Cohen, who was the stage manager up in the booth, which we could see because the lights were on up there. I could see it. And I said, okay. and all the actors cheered and the audience cheered. And we walked off stage and went back to the dressing room.
Yeah, you had to. You were about to be drowned, right?
But neither Cohen nor Joe Papp liked it that I'd taken it into my own hands. And I don't remember anybody actually yelling at me. That's good. Richard Dreyfuss told me a story once when he was first acting in a play at school when he was a little kid of feeling this presence next to him. And his mother was right on stage. She was started to mess with his hair.
Oh, my goodness.
His hair. She walked right up on stage talking about being interfered with.
Yeah. That's
Yes.
my gosh.
My book just came out.
I'm so excited to finally read what you've been working on, Daddy-O.
I hear it's about mental health. Mark Metcalf's memoir, Timmy, is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble now. The ebook is available too. I remember talking with Gary Oldman, who's in our film, about Dr. Theater, how you can have the worst flu, you can be injured, you can have all that, but the minute the curtain rises, somehow this Herculean thing happens and the show goes on and you're able to do these things that you couldn't do if you weren't performing.
Yeah, it's some kind of a miracle. When I was doing The Tempest at Lincoln Center, again in the Mitzi Newhouse Theater, and Santa LaQuasto had done the set and there was sand everywhere and it had silicone in it and everybody was breathing, and when it gets dried out, it gets in your lungs, so people got sick. So then they started wetting it down so the silicone wouldn't rise up and people got sick, and I had 104-degree temperature.
Oh.
And my understudy was going on for somebody else. Something like 4 people were
sick from it.
Were sick from, mostly from walking on the wet sand and breathing silicone before. So I had to go on with 104 temperature, and somehow I managed to do it. I don't know how. It's really kind of miraculous what we can do. I was doing a play in college, Camino Real, the Tennessee Williams play. There's a fight scene in it, and I was thrown to the ground a couple of times and dragged, and I opened a big sore on the arch of my foot on the top. I went on, and night after night, we played it for a month, and night after night with this scab there, and it hurt like hell, but I didn't know it when I was acting, and I didn't even think of it. And then the morning after closing night, the scab had healed over, and it hurt like hell when I moved it because the scab was pulling all that skin, but it didn't do that.
While you were working.
While I was working, while I needed to walk and run and jump and do things and dance and things like that.
It's magic. I was shooting an episode of Criminal Minds and then at night doing the John Patrick Shanley play, Danny and the Deep Blue Sea, and I had pneumonia and I didn't have an understudy, and they were like, no, we're going to keep going. And of course I was shooting, and so I was working sick and I could hardly move. It was so bad, the bronchial, whatever it was, that I had like cramps all over my lung, like I couldn't move. But of course I was doing a scene where I'm getting held down and detained. Did that during the day, did the show at night. Somehow, even though I could hardly breathe and move, and then somehow you do it.
Somehow you do it. Yeah. What's the great line in Shakespeare in Love where Geoffrey Rush says, the show must, and somebody says, go on. And that's how we came up with the show must go on. The show must go on.
That's great. So how were you cast as the Master?
The audition process again. I did, I think, 3 auditions. The casting director told me after the first one, when I was leaving, she told me, don't expect too much because I don't know what he wants. And I've tried. We've had so many people come in and I can't figure out what Joss wants. So I'm doing what casting directors often do, which is sort of bracket it. I'll give him what I think is perfectly right, and I'll give him what I think is perfectly wrong. And you're here because you're perfectly wrong for this.
Oh my gosh.
So that way I know that that's the bracket that I'd bump up against when I bring the next group of people in. But oddly enough,
You were not wrong.
I was not wrong. I liked it. And he had me back. I think I read one more time and then again, and finally read it. And when he told me I got it, I said, so what's the arc of this character through the season? I know it's just this one season, but what's the arc? And he said, it's really great because in the last episode, you kill Buffy. And I said, oh, that's nice. Does that mean if it gets picked up, it'll be called Master the Buffy Slayer? And he laughed, which is what he was meant to do. He didn't tell me, though, that I killed Buffy and then I brought her back to life.
Right. And then she kills you. Like he left that bit out.
Turn into gold dust in the air, yeah.
How was the Master described to you?
Physically, the pictures they had of him, the drawings of him, he had dark hair, kind of long, kind of Keith Richards-y dark hair. And it felt to me as though he looked a little bit like Keith Richards. They had him in the same kind of leather, metallic, Germanic-looking Nazi. There's an implication of fascism in the jacket.
The jacket.
Which was fine with me. Just the act of having to live forever might give you the idea that you can control everybody. Anyway, so by the time I saw those drawings, I had been doing a little bit of research, and I knew the Murnau film Nosferatu. And so I said to the makeup person when I went in for, I guess, just a consultation, or I said to Joss, maybe the dark hair is nice, the Keith Richards kind of thing, but it kind of puts it in a particular place that maybe doesn't have as much room to grow. But if you go back even further and go to like the original vampire, and I think Nosferatu is the original vampire on film, but the bald head and the austerity of it, can we work with that? Because then we're telling some of the history of vampires. And Josh said, well, you know, the great thing about telling a vampire story is that there are no rules. You get to make them all up, which was true, but it's still part of a history.
Of a lore.
The lore, yeah. Exactly. Of vampires and vampires on film. And he liked that idea, so they had him create that mask.
Wonderful. So you were instrumental in the whole look that developed of the Master.
Well, they were just starting out. They hadn't shot anything yet, and they were just putting it together. And people are much more open to collaboration when they're all starting out together, when this community is just forming. And so they wanted to collaborate. So yes, I had a lot of input, which I'm grateful for.
Did you do makeup tests, or were you right away doing the makeup when you were shooting?
Right away doing the makeup when we were shooting, because they didn't know exactly what they wanted to look like. So that's why it took 5 hours. They would put it on me, the mask, the headpiece, the ears, the neck, and then they would paint it. I wanted to see what it looked like, and they let me collaborate, even though I'm colorblind.
Oh, is that right? You're colorblind?
Well, red-green. 75% of all men are to one degree or another red-green, but they let me make comments. They collaborated with me, which was great. And as you can see, if you watch it from beginning to end, that first season, that what she refers to as my punchbowl mouth
changes.
It's not really there in the beginning. They slowly realized that this kind of blood-stained lips and around the mouth was a good idea.
That you'd been drinking so much blood for so long.
I just was so gorged on blood. And the mask was so beautifully thin layer of foam, so it picked up lots of facial expression.
Right, all the nuance.
Little things you could do. I mean, you still had to sort of overact, but overacting is easy for me. In fact, underacting is the hard part. But you had to overact a little bit so that it would read, but it was great stuff.
So initially it took 5.5 hours. When did it change, and how long did they get it down to?
They got it down to 3.5 hours because they would paint it ahead of time. But it took, I think, like 4 or 5 episodes before they really got it so where they could say, come in 2 hours later because we will be able to get it done. Because they put it on, then they'd have to paint it and make it seamless.
And how long would it take to remove it?
An hour and a half on average from the beginning, because they were very careful. They really wanted to protect my skin and my face, which I was grateful for. They told me that when Rene Aubergenois did Star Trek, he was a shapeshifter, that he would just come in and just rip it off his face. My face wouldn't have come off if I'd done that.
Was this your first foray into working with prosthetics?
Yes, it was the first, other than the putty nose that I wore in Henry VI, but it was the first experience with real professional prosthetics.
And you talked a little bit about it earlier in saying that there's something so liberating when you work with a mask. Did you find it with the Master that it was very liberating? Did you also find it daunting to have that much makeup? Was there both of those things? Did they coexist?
They did coexist. The teeth were very hard to talk through, so I had to talk much more clearly than I might have if I was ordinarily doing a vampire. And that led me to a certain degree to the aristocracy of him, which I thought was there anyway, but that the enunciation, the clarity with which I had to speak gave him a little bit more of an aristocratic bearing.
A grandeur.
Exactly, grandeur. And I also tried to channel Sylvia Sidney in Sunset Boulevard a little bit, especially with the hands and the sense of imperialism of being, I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille, that kind of poise. I wanted him to have some of that, because if you have that, then it's funnier when he goes, "Oh, you have something in your eye," when he sticks his finger in one of his minions' eyes because they didn't do the right thing.
Yes.
Then the casual off-the-cuff suffer when there's an earthquake, it's in 4.5, don't you think? When I can say something like that, it makes that funnier if everything. That's part of the job, is to make it, make it funny without making it ridiculous.
How much of a backstory were you told?
Not much, just that I think I was told that he was 800 years old and he'd been living in a church underground. I think I just took those few details and went on. I found out later that I'd made Darla when I did episodes of Angel, and that Darla had then made Angel. And I'd like finding out that I'd made Darla, because I really liked when I worked with her in one episode, I think, on Buffy, the first season. She was great to work with. She was really fun.
Yeah, I worked with Juliet a lot, and she was great. We just did an interview with her, and she mentioned that she never got to see you without your makeup while working on Buffy.
I guess that's probably true. I guess nobody did. I know when I do these conventions and people come to the table, they look at everybody else because they don't know. I mean, especially if it's a Buffy fan.
Related to, yeah.
I don't really know what I look like. Now people do, after I've been to enough conventions. But yeah, no, that's right. I hadn't even thought of that she'd never.
Well, you came in so much earlier than everybody to be in the makeup chair for that length of time. I talked to Willem Dafoe about a couple things about Shadow of the Vampire, and he was saying that he too met everybody, the crew and the cast, only in the makeup, and that it was an interesting relationship they all had, the way that they slightly treated him. They knew he's an actor and they knew it was Willem, but having that visage affected that. Did you find that as well?
Oh, yeah. The only people who were sort of comfortable around me, and I'm not even sure that they were, they just appeared to be, were the makeup people who had seen the whole transformation, and some of the wardrobe people, because one of them in particular, because with the nails that were on, they were fragile.
Right.
I couldn't unzip my pants and go to the bathroom.
I was going to ask you that, because Willem also mentioned that once he was in with his nails in his hands, he could not go to the loo. And when I was working with Johnny Depp, he mentioned for Edward Scissorhands that he actually had it in his contract, since he is a chain smoker and smokes so much, to have a contraption built that would hold a cigarette so that he could smoke in between takes, was in his contract. So I was wondering about you on set. So you had a special personal assistant to help you go to the loo?
There was a young woman in the wardrobe department who would help me go to the bathroom. Yeah.
My goodness. What we do for
Yeah.
our art, right? It's crazy.
Yes.
What did you do during lunch? How did you eat?
Most of the time, if I ate, and I often don't eat much at lunch because my body uses a lot of energy to digest.
Oh.
I'll eat very little fruit or something at the beginning of the day before I go into makeup.
Do you get tired when you eat? Is that part of it?
Yes, my metabolism goes towards digestion, and it's not there for me to use.
I'm the opposite to you. I have to eat. I have a crazy
you're so skinny.
metabolism. My husband, when we got married, he came up with a slogan, which is, you don't do drugs with Keith Richards and you don't eat with Juliet, because he gained 20 pounds and I didn't gain weight because I just have this insane metabolism.
Your metabolism burns it up.
I eat more than he does. Todd, the makeup department head, told me that There was a unique way that because you would get hot and you would be sweating that he would alleviate that with you. What was that?
The sweat would pool if I turned my head down right at the end of my nose. So they would stick a needle, just a pinprick, in the end of my nose and kind of milk it
Oh my gosh.
and squeeze the sweat out as much as they could. And then they had to come back and touch it up, obviously, to touch up the hole and sneak a brush in there and apply any new adhesive that they needed to. I always remember that because I could feel it running down.
Starting to, get
Yeah.
everywhere, right?
Yeah. You're sweating everywhere, and I guess the foam absorbs some of it, but it all cools down. And if there's any space at all, it's here at the end of the nose. It's trying to get out through the opening there, but it couldn't, so they have to stick a needle in it
And milk it.
and then milk it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. As we say, the glamour of it all.
Yeah, it's all such a glamorous business. Exactly. You help you pee, milking clothes.
Look at your
Yeah.
nose. What would you say was the key to the character for you?
I said this or something like this in a little documentary that they made about me, about acting, and it opens the film.
It's called Character, right?
Exactly. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet. I want to see it.
I think New Yorker Films has it on their website.
Ooh, I can't wait to watch it. It sounds amazing.
Well, it may not be amazing. I think it's really good and really interesting. I learned a lot about myself working with Vera Brunner-Sung because she just wanted to talk to me about acting so she could learn about how to talk to actors. So we recorded, I think, about 6 hours of audio. And then she said, I want to make a documentary about you using some of the threads that you created. And there's a whole opening part of it where I'm sort of doing what my stage warm-up is, making sounds and walking around toes and walking on my heels, doing an old circus warm-up that Javi Burgess at NYU used to do. What was that question? He has a power. He has a power of himself being himself that he knows about, the power of himself. And we all have a power. But he's been denied it for hundreds and hundreds of years, and who knows how long he's been buried in a church under Sunnydale and not able to come out. And that would make you angry, but it would also make you even more of yourself, and it would make you want to take that power. I decided it would make him want to take that power and wreak havoc, revenge on the planet, on the humans that have denied me my existence. That was where it landed for me. And that was what it grew out of, is that oppression that he feels, and what I think a lot of people feel when they're oppressed eventually, is they want to explode. They want to do it their way. The moral of that is don't oppress people because it'll make them mad.
The Master as the first big bad sets the tone for the rest of the series. For all of us that came after you, the villains that followed, how did you go about creating his universe, his style, his tone?
One thing I listened to a lot of was Gregorian chants, and then I found some other chants that some Buddhist monks did, where each individual monk is able to make two sounds at once and harmonize with himself. It's a very low kind of groaning sound.
Uh-huh.
And I listened to a lot of that. That grounded me.
Mm-hmm.
And the other things, like I said, 5 hours of makeup, 5 hours of not being able to really talk except little tiny comments without moving my mouth so it doesn't mess up what they're doing.
So you'd get into bit by bit into this meditative.
Bit by bit, slowly. When I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time in makeup, I had the surprising idea of wanting to learn Italian. I thought I could learn Italian with headphones, and you can't do that. You can't put headphones on. I would get them to play, and they picked some of their own music, but I would get them to play those chants for me. And I used that time to just sink further and further into the world of, and when you talk about how did I create his world, they created it. That church that's underground.
Beautiful.
It was really beautiful.
Yeah.
And in the 2 or 3 episodes, they had real dust in there and real dirt, and everybody started getting sick again, like they got sick when I was doing The Tempest with silicone sand. The dust was so dry with the heat and the lights that it gets in the air and everybody was breathing it. And then they finally decided to get rid of the dust and they painted it in. But those first 3 or 4 episodes, it was beautifully ugly, empty, alone.
Desolate but elaborate. It was beautifully shot by Michael.
Yeah. Yeah. No, everything about that series was really well done.
I also create a soundtrack for every character that I play. I love that you did that with the chants. I find it a touch paper for me if I'm on set and I just listen to a little bit of that music. It puts me right into whatever character that I'm playing.
It really does. Music's a great access point. I haven't done it with all my parts, but I have done it when I knew what the music was.
What do you think the Master was like when he was human? What was his backstory that you created for him? What was he up to?
The idea of taking somebody's blood and drinking their blood.
To be continued. And now we're going to reveal our next contenders for the Battle of the Uber Buffy fans, the ultimate trivia contest. Drum roll, please.
Hi, my name's Stephen. I'm from Leeds, West Yorkshire, and I've seen Buffy the Vampire Slayer about, if I had to guess, I'd think about 100 times.
Hi, Scoobies. My name is Melanie, and I am from the Netherlands, The Hague to be exact. And over here we call it Buffy instead of Buffy. I've seen Buffy at least 50 times through, I think.
The demand has been overwhelming. All slots are now filled, but we will be announcing 2 contenders each week till everyone is announced.
Let's get ready for Buffy!
Re-Vamped E's, please correspond with me on Twitter at Juliet Landau or on Instagram at Juliet_Landau and on the Fans of Juliet Landau Facebook group or Juliet Landau official Facebook page. You can also join up with all our Re-Vamped on Patreon. There are all kinds of tiers and really exciting stuff. Our Patreon peeps to be read in the credits: Dave Hall, Timothy Kendall, Danielle Harbour, Louise Brennan, and Brandon Key. It makes all the difference because we cannot keep making the show without you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week when we do it again. Do it again. Until next time, rewatch, revamp, reinvent, and be remarkable you.